Well, all right, and welcome to the God Talk with host Chris Marshall. We we've been going through this message series called Behind the Scenes. Last week we looked in the Bible at at Luke, and we looked at this man who was short. He had his shortcomings. He couldn't see over his inability to see God. He couldn't see over his own problems. And so today, I want to talk to you guys about a woman who, again, falls short. Can't because she can't see the potential that she has. She can't see the things that God's planned out for her. And as we've been going through this message, we're looking at our behind the scenes. How we often look at our behind the scenes and we compare it to other people's life. We look at how well other people's lives are going and we compare it to our lives. And so last week we looked at Zacchaeus, and he compared his life to everyone else around him. Because everyone else around him was able to see Jesus, but he was not able to because he was too short. And he compared his life to the life around him. But God says, you know what? I'm doing something in you. I'm doing something in your life today, right now. That is going to be more important than everything else you're doing. Everyone else around you is doing. We often don't see our potential because we can only see what we don't have. We can't see what God's put out in front of us. We can't see His potential. We can't see His faithfulness. We can't see His grace because we're always looking back at ourselves. We're always looking back at ourselves thinking, why can't I have what that person has? Why can't I have what other people have? And God says, you know what? I'm doing something in you. I'm doing a work in you. You might not be able to see it, but I am doing something in you. And so today we're going to look at a woman who fell short. But God said, you know what? It doesn't matter if you fall short today, tomorrow, years from now. I will always love you. I will always love you. And so if you guys have your Bibles, man, that's awesome. Blow them off to small, whatever you gotta do to get them open. And today we're going to be in John. We're going to be in John chapter 8. And again, looking at the person who fell short, comparing their lives to the lives around them. And so, again, so many of us compare our lives. We do a comparison. We put our lives against someone else's life and say, you know what, I don't have this. I don't have that. But maybe what we lack or what we don't have, we actually excel in other parts. So often we don't see the gifts that we have because we're looking at somebody else's gifts. Some of us today are very talented, very talented. But yet we look at somebody else's life and think, wow, they're way more talented than I am. Man, they can do this kick better than I can. They can sing better than I can. They have a better body than I did. But God says, I've created you. I've created you perfectly. So those gifts that you think that you do not have, you just need to go out and seek them. You need to go out and find them. Because I have put these gifts in you. So stop comparing your life to the life that we don't have. And so, if you guys have your Bibles, man, read along with me. And if you don't have your Bibles, just know that I'm deeply offended. And it says this in John chapter 8. It says, at dawn he appeared again at the temple, where all the people were gathered around him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The elders of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group, and he said, teacher, the woman was caught in the act of adultery. And the law of Moses commands us to stone such women. Now what do you say? Well, we see what Jesus does. It says, they were using these questions to trap him in order to use blasphemy against him. But it says, but Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. They kept on questioning him. He straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone who is without sin cast the first stone, or throw the first stone at her." Again he stopped, and he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time, the oldest first, and then the youngest, until only Jesus was left. With the woman still standing there, Jesus straightened up and he said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you." Jesus closed. She says, "Now go and leave your life of sin." Leave your life of sin. And so today we're going to go off the basis of do not compare your shortcomings. Do not compare your shortcomings. We see that in this story, this woman was caught in adultery, and it seems straightforward. It seems like she was caught. Jesus straightened it out. He didn't condemn her, and everything was good, and the story is great, and it's a great little Bible story. But when we actually dig deep into this story, it has many layers. So it says that the woman, not the man, which I always state every time I tell this story. Where was the man? Like, was he not good enough? Was he not as guilty? Because maybe the guy was married, but the woman wasn't. Maybe the woman was married, but the guy wasn't. But it doesn't mean that they should have been doing it. And the guy's just as guilty. But only the woman was dragged out. How often in our lives do we often take one aspect of our life and we drag it out? We drag it out, we rip it out of our lives. That place where we used to feel safe, that place that we used to be comfortable in. And we often rip that place out of our hearts. And we drag it on the ground behind us until it's in shattered pieces. Maybe today that's your confidence. Maybe today that's your passion. Maybe today that's your focus. And you ripped it out. And it's just dragging along. And then you wonder why your life doesn't feel complete. You feel like you aren't amounting to anything. But it's just because we've taken out the aspect of our life that we thought was unworthy. We took the aspect of our life that we didn't think that we needed. And so we see that as the woman was guilty, the man was guilty also. And so we see that when we decide to look at our lives, we often judge the other person first before we judge ourselves. We often look at their lives and think, man, if I just had that, if I could just be as talented as them, and we start to blame them for the things that we don't have. Just like this woman was blamed for being caught in the act, just as the man was as guilty as her. They blamed the woman, but they didn't blame the man. And so often we blame the woman in our life. Maybe not physical woman, but we blame the aspects of our life that we think are unworthy. We blame the aspects of our life that we think that we won't amount. And we blame that part of our life for the things that we don't have. We blame the empty parts of our life on Jesus. We blame the empty parts of our life on Jesus because we are too busy comparing what we don't have. So we see that Jesus, he's teaching, and they drag this person out. And so often we will drag our problems in front of God, saying, Jesus, fix this broken part of my life. But I like what Stephen Furtick said. Stephen Furtick said, well, wait a minute. What if myself? What if it was my stupid self who got myself in that situation? So often it's not Jesus who we need help from, but it's ourselves. Sometimes we need to claw our own way out of the hole that we put ourselves in. We need to claw our way out of this hole that we are in. Because Jesus is not someone to just be used when we are in a tight spot, but he's someone to be used all the time. Not because he wants to be, but because not because he needs to be. Because he wants to be. He wants to be used by you. Not just when you need him, but all the time. Because he loves you. Because he loves you. And so we often drag our problems out before God. But we see that as these people were questioning him, as the Pharisees were hounding him, and saying, Jesus, look what this woman was doing. This woman was caught in the act, and I can't believe it, and it was just horrible. And in the law of Moses, the father, you have to stone her. Now, we often see that in this, we often want to stone the best part of us. And not stoned as in drugs, as in smoking, as in 420 blazing. But we often want to evaporate the best parts of us. We often want to take away the best parts of us. Because we don't feel like we're worthy enough. We don't feel like we live up to the expectations of these other people, of the people that are around us. And so we see that now that we're in this rut, now that we're in this place, now that we're standing in front of Jesus with our problems, we expect him to fix it right away. But we see that Jesus doesn't fix our problems right away. He says, you know what, I'm going to do something even better. And so often we think that Jesus' condemning silence is him doing nothing, when his condemning silence is him changing us, is him doing something in our lives. His condemning silence doesn't mean that he left us, because it doesn't say that Jesus looked up to the Pharisees and said, you know what, Pharisees, be gone, for you're wrong. But this woman, yes, she should be stoned. And Jesus had every right to stone her. Jesus had every right to pick up a rock and hit her in the head with it. And thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, how could Jesus do something so horrible? But it's true. He had every right to do that. But instead, he didn't say a word. But instead, he started to write on the ground. Because we see that Jesus' condemning silence wasn't him doing nothing, but it was him changing this woman's life forever. And some of us today need to realize that just because Jesus isn't saying anything doesn't mean he left us. Just because we don't feel him near doesn't mean that he has abandoned us. Just because we don't see our life heading in the right direction doesn't mean he doesn't have a part to play in a bigger role in our life. Because right now you could be in the hardest season of your life, or you could be in the easiest season of your life. But just because you do not feel him near doesn't mean that he's given up. This woman was probably thinking, man, if only I didn't get caught in this situation. If only Jesus would say something right now. If only these people would stop looking at me with their judgmental eyes. If only. And we see that just as Zacchaeus was saying, if only I was taller. If only if I had these people's height. If only if I had these people's trust. If only I had these people. But Jesus says, I'm doing something in you. I'm doing something in you. You might not be able to see it. Because just because you're short, or just because of your shortcomings, does not mean that I have given up on you. Because we see that Zacchaeus' shortcoming was that he couldn't see over the crowd. Yeah, that was his shortcoming. His shortcoming was he couldn't see the blessings of God because he was too short. And if he had given up, if he had said, you know what, this isn't worth it anymore. Obviously, I'm not tall enough to see Jesus, so I'm just gonna go home. He could have done that. He could have just been like, I'm just gonna go home because I can't see Jesus. I'm too short. I just can't do it. He'd given up. Jesus would never have been able to stop in that spot that he did and look up in the tree to see a man fully devoted to seeing the one who changes lives. So some of us today, like Zacchaeus, we need to climb that tree. We need to climb the tree to see God's fruit. We need to climb that tree to see his provision. We need to climb that tree and say, God's created me more than what's on the surface, more than what's behind my scenes. Because we often compare our behind the scenes to somebody else's highlight reel, to someone else's life. But the gifts that God has given us might be in music, might be in preaching, might be just in the everyday life of loving someone or smiling. That is our tree that we need to climb. Because when we climb that tree, we will see Jesus. And just like this woman now, she had her shortcoming, which was being caught in a most sacred act. And her shortcoming, she thought that her life was over. In her shortcoming, she didn't give herself enough faith. So we see that these people, the Pharisees, they start to come up to Jesus like, yo, Jesus, in the law of Moses, you're supposed to stone her. Because she's a sinner. You know that? You know that she is a sinner. And sinners get stoned. And or sinners get stitches. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But we see that Jesus, he bent down, he started writing in the sand, or he started writing on the ground. And it could have been the list of every single sin that they've ever committed. It could have been every blasphemous thing that they've ever done. It could have been that Jesus simply wrote down and said, I will not condemn this person. We don't know what he wrote, but we do know what he said. And so often we need to listen up, because so often we drown out the noises of our life. We drown out the good in our life, and we let the negativity into our life until the negativity is the only thing that we hear. Oh, you don't have this. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, if you only had this. And we start to compare our lives more and more. But Jesus says, you need to stop comparing your life, because I'm saying something to you. But we see that she couldn't hear over her circumstances. So Jesus simply started to write so she could read. So she could read God's circumstance. And that's powerful. That's powerful. That's something that you guys need to know today. Just because you can't hear doesn't mean you can't see. Because she couldn't hear over her circumstance. She couldn't hear God. She couldn't hear Jesus' voice because of the crowd. The crowd was thinking, stone her. Probably chanting, we will stone her. Stone her. We will stone her. Stone her. And she couldn't hear over the crowd. So Jesus simply started to write out. She simply started to write so she could read. He simply wrote, I will not condemn you. Some of us today need to look at the writings on our hearts. It says in the Bible, take a verse and lock it away in your heart. Write those words on your heart so that you will remember them always. And the one thing I truly believe that this woman wrote on her heart was in the last paragraph, the verse, is go and leave your life of sin. Why? Why is that so important? Because we see that Jesus started to write down. He put his finger to the ground. Put his finger to the ground. He started to write out. Started to write out. And the Pharisees were like, you know what? I don't have time for this. And they started to leave one by one. Till it was only Jesus and her standing in the crowd. And she looks at me and says, are they gone? She's like, yeah. He's like, cool. I won't condemn you. I won't condemn you. Even though he had every right to. He had every right to condemn her. He chose not to. Because he said, you know what? Stop looking at what you don't have. Stop looking at what you think that you want. Stop looking at other people's lives, because I've created you. I've created you to do a bigger work than what you think you're doing right now. So some of us today need to realize and remember that our lives are much more than what Facebook says it is. We are more than Instagram and Snapchats. We are more than Facebooks and tweets. Our lives are not snapped in a moment, but our lives are snapped in an instant. An instant of where we get to know the God who loves us. And we start to realize that our lives aren't just Instagrams and Snaps and Facebooks, but our lives hold a bigger meaning with the time and the talent that we put into it. And that time and that talent that we put into it will often lead to someone else's success. Will often lead to someone else's success. With our time, with our talent, with our tongue, we can either lead someone to success, or we can lead them to destruction. But we often use our lives to lead someone else's future. So today, as you're going through life, stop comparing your life to what you don't have. Because in that thing that you think that you don't have, you might not have that, but you excelled in the experiences that you've had. I've said it one time because I want you guys to get this. You might not have what your friend has. You might not have material things like a girlfriend, or money, or whatever that thing is that you want from your friend. And it's so much more than just the surface. But what we do not have, we excel in other places. Some of us today have experiences, have moments in our life that we wish that we could take back. We have moments and instances in our life that we wish that we could change. That we wish that you could have said something different. That you wish that you could have done something different. But those things that you think that define you are the things that are going to lead you to success. I've told you guys some of my stories and some of the promises that I've had to make to myself because I want to succeed. I am not defined by my past, and my future is not set. I'm going to lead by the examples that I've had. I'm going to lead so that other people might know that these things in my life that I do not have, I do not need, because of the power of God, the power of grace is overflowing in my life. So these things that I don't have, I don't need them. Because there's a God who decided that I was enough. There is a God that said, you know what? Stop comparing your life to the life that you don't have. Because I've given you a life. I've given you experiences. I've given you time. I've given you trials and tribulations. So stop saying that you want something that is not really yours. Stop saying that you want something that I'm eventually going to put in your life. It might not be now, but I will. And so today, as you're comparing your life, as you're comparing the things that you do not have. It might be a girlfriend, it might be money, it might be a new car. God will bless you with a car. That relationship that you see your friend in might not work in 5 years. But that relationship that God gives you with another person, that's going to last a lifetime. That money that you don't have right now, it's just a setup to your success. Because right now you could be flat broke. But in a year, you could have billions. All depends on your point of view. So that's the second part, your point of view. We see that this woman's point of view, who was caught in adultery, was, I'm supposed to be stoned. That was her point of view. That's what she was taught. That's what she learned. But God's point of view is, I'm going to give grace. And grace is undeserved love. I'm going to love her. Even though it hurts, I'm going to love her. Even though everyone else says not to, I'm going to love her. Because that's what I've meant. That is what I've been called to do. All on your point of view. So as we compare our life side to side with the life that we don't have, we need to take a step back and look at the point of view of Christ. Because he will say, this thing in your life that you don't have, you don't need to compare it anymore. Because that thing that you're holding on to, that thing that's turning you bitter, that thing that makes you angry or sad at night, these things are not things that you need to worry about. These are not things that you need in your life right now. Because when I put them in your life, when I put this person in your life, you will know that it was from me. You will know. And this relationship, this money, this car that you have, that might all fail. But I will remain. I will remain. So I want to ask some of you today. And I know some of my points have been all over. But how many of us need to stop comparing our lives and start trusting in God? How many of us need to stop comparing what we don't have and start comparing our life to Christ? We often compare our lives to the people who are closest to us. We often compare our lives to our friends. We often compare our lives to our families. But not enough of us compare our lives to God. Because if we compared our lives to Jesus, if we compared our lives to the things that he did in his time, we would strive to do better. We would strive to do better. But we often fall short. We often want the things of this world instead of wanting the things of God. So some of us today need to stop comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Because that highlight reel might be only for a short time. It might be like I explained last week. It might be that highlight reel might seem very entertaining. Like the Kardashians. They're not famous anymore. They might be in the news sometimes, but they're really not famous anymore. It might seem sweet for a short while. It might seem that they're on top of the world for a short while. But that won't remain. But what will remain is Christ. And he says, stop comparing your life to others. Just like he said to this girl, I will not condemn you. So go and sin no more. Go and leave your life of sin. Go, stop comparing your lives to others. Because I'm doing a work in you. You might not be able to see it. You might not know that it's there. But I'm doing something in you right now. Doing something in you. So, as we close this message series, we need to realize that our lives are much more than what we might think it is. Our lives are much more than Snapchats, and tweets, and Facebooks, and Instagrams. Because God has put talents and experiences in our life that no one else has. So we can either set up for success or we can set up for destruction. And one of my favorite quotes is, get busy living or get busy dying. And so I used it in the message series with, what would you guys do? Why don't you guys do? You guys plug out everything you have in you. And so last week I asked you guys, why do we compare our behind the scenes? Yeah, we compare our dogs compare their lives to other dogs. Yeah, we compare our lives to our favorite football teams, but when it comes to faith, followers, and family members, why do we compare our behind the scenes? So this week says, realize that our behind the scenes does not define our life. Yeah, our dogs can kind of define their own life. Yeah, we kind of define our favorite football teams can define their lives. But when it comes to faith, followers, and family members, know that your behind the scenes does not define your life. And with all that in your head, with all that going around, let me pray for all of you tonight. God, you're a gracious God. Lord, I want to thank you so much for who you are and what you've done. Lord, you have called us to do more and be more. Lord, you have called some of us to passion. You've called some of us to do above and beyond what anyone else is doing. Lord, as we go through this life, Lord, help us not to compare our lives. Help us not to compare our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Because, Lord, you have given us this life. You've given us experiences. Lord, some of it we wish that we could take back, but some of it defines who we are today. So, Lord, if we ever had to switch lives, we wouldn't like it. Because we know that you have given us these opportunities to preach, to love, and to share. So, Lord, help us to be the person you have called us and want us to be. Lord, break our hearts. What breaks yours? I just pray this all in your very awesome, your very glorious name. Amen. If you guys have any questions or just want to chat or, want some of my material, please email me at thegodtalkradio@gmail.com. You can also go to my Facebook page, The God Talk Radio, and you can message me there. I'll be always happy to chat with you guys. And you can also find me on Twitter and on YouTube at The God Talk Radio. And with all that said, your host, Chris Marquardt. I'll catch you guys later.